Hey, Taylor Elwood here, and I thought today I would share my process for examining failure in business. Um, in part because right now that's really what I'm doing. I'm looking at two different businesses that just catastrophically failed that I've run, and they were successful at one time to one degree or another. I'm not going to say they were rip-roaring successes, but they were certainly more successful than where they're at right now. So I'm really having to go through this process. And I'm going to get really intimate here with you because this is not an easy process for examining failure in business. Right now I can tell you that there have been days that I've been depressed. There have been days where I've beat myself up. There are days where I feel angry, sad, frustrated, all of the above. And it's one of those things where part of examining that failure in business is that you have to get comfortable with those uncomfortable feelings. And that's hard because that means that you're basically accepting that, yes, you failed. In my case, in accepting my failure, it's really a case of it's not necessarily a case of giving up either. Accepting failure doesn't mean that you're quitting. Accepting failure doesn't mean that you've given up. It just means that you're accepting that for the circumstances being where they're at, this is where you're at. Now, there's one other thing I want to point out too, is that if you have failed in your business and you do decide to quit, quitting is okay. I want to say that, quitting is acceptable. There are times to quit. I mean, one of the things that I'm really having to sit with right now is, do I want to quit either of the businesses that have catastrophically failed? And the realization I've come away with is, no, I don't want to quit them, but I need to radically change the things. And in the case of the one business, I'm going back to a previous model where I am going to continue to offer some classes in it. I've decided I'm going to do that, but I've decided that I'm going to step way back from being super salesy, because that was, I think, a huge part of the problem. I ended up being super salesy. The other thing I'm doing is I'm realizing, okay, I got too attached to specific outcomes, and that was stupid of me. I don't recommend becoming overly attached to outcomes, but let's be honest, when you own a business and you're trying to launch a class or do something else like that, it's very easy to become very attached. You want this thing to succeed. But I think at a certain point, you have to cultivate a state of not caring. And I don't mean not caring about your customers, or clients, and you want to care about them. I mean not caring about the results of your launch, not caring about, whether it's successful or not. And that probably sounds odd. Why would you even want to do that? But the answer to that really is, you have to figure out how to operate from a place where it's not going to affect you so personally if things don't work out, where instead you're going to be able to learn from it. And for myself, when I look back at the one business this last year, what I see is I got too emotionally attached to the success of that business. I wanted it to succeed. I wanted it to become a lot more than what it could be. I wanted it to be a significant means of bringing income into my life, instead of recognizing that it will always, at best, be supplementary income, and that's it. And I got super invested in creating this type of community around this, and it wasn't going to happen. It just wasn't. And that's a hard thing to live with. It's like, oh my gosh, it really just didn't work. So there's that. With the other business, this business, Eccentric Entrepreneurs, well, for one thing, my focus was split between two different businesses, and I was putting too much time into one business that really wasn't working out. The other problem with this business is that my messaging just hasn't really been solid. I'm not even very clear at this point at what I'm really doing. And I don't have any problem admitting that to you, because that's part of this process of failure, is that you have to take that hard look at what isn't working and why, and own your part of it. And I'm not going to say that when your business fails, it may not always be entirely your fault, so to speak. But you have to be willing to own the parts that you are responsible for. And in the case of Eccentric Entrepreneurs, I didn't have consistent branding until very recently. I didn't have a process, I didn't really have a central message either. Now the branding, I think, has pretty much been fixed at this point. So, but the messaging, not so much. I guess messaging is part of branding, but the messaging aspect of the branding isn't really fixed. I mean, I have to figure that out at this point. What do I really want to do with this business? Where does it go? And so that one's going to take some time. I need to really sit with that and figure it out. But that's part of what this process for examining failure is there for, because it really helps you to see, okay, here's where things haven't worked, and here's where they're at. And again, part of it is really, again, coming right down to being able to emotionally accept where you're at. I think, I mentioned that one again because I think it's so crucial. I mean, I can't tell you how hard in some ways this has been for me right now, faced with this realization of things have not worked. And I went from a place where I was moderately successful. I'm not going to say like hugely successful, but moderately successful, and kind of incrementally growing to down, 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 And that sucks. I gotta tell you, that really sucks. But if I can't accept that, then and then rebuild from there and really figure things out from there, that's where then I get stuck in the failure instead of using it. And so this is where the emotion aspect of it comes into play. You have to be comfortable with your emotions. And that sounds odd because really these emotions are uncomfortable. When I'm talking about being present with feeling depressed or unhappy or angry or whatever else, these are not comfortable emotions to sit with in your business. I mean, this is you basically saying, well, things really got messed up. I couldn't put it together the way I wanted it to. And that's not a comfortable feeling at all. But you have to get comfortable with feeling it. It's you can be uncomfortable with the feeling itself, but you have to be comfortable enough to feel it and accept it. And it's one of those things where I can say this has literally taken me months to get to this point. I mean, I realized back in August that things were not going to work out. But I'll be honest with you, I kind of went into a state of denial, and I tried a few different things trying to make it work. None of the things I did worked. It was kind of like I was scrabbling, to try and scrabble out of the pit, and nothing I did worked. It just made me slide that much faster. In September, I got to the point where I accepted, okay, I need to start looking into alternative means of taking care of my basic needs. I need to find a job. And so I started looking and looking and looking. And at the same time, part of me was still like, well, maybe I could turn this around. Maybe if but nothing I was doing was working. And finally, in October, I kind of came to more of a place of acceptance. And then in November, I actually, landed a job, which I'll be starting relatively soon. And that's kind of when it fully hit. And it's like, yeah, here I am. I'm having to go back to work. And now I've got to move forward with this. I have to accept it and move on and figure out what does happen with these two businesses. Where do these two businesses fit in my life while I'm in the process of moving on to the next thing? And it's not easy work. But that's part of the process for examining failure, is being able to own up and accept your responsibility for things and then make changes accordingly. So that's what I'm in the process of doing. And I'm sharing this with you because I think that a lot of times, we're not as a culture very comfortable talking about failure. And I think talking about failure is absolutely essential in order to improve anything. I mean, you have to be willing to fail forward. So today I thought I would share those thoughts with you guys and kind of go from there. So that's my process for examining failure. And if you feel so inclined, leave a comment sharing with me what your process for examining failure is. All right, talk to you later and take care.